Okay. And if it's too loud, just thank you for the kind introduction, Christine. I think it's a little too loud. And it's a real pleasure to be here to speak to you this evening on our work on restoring, a fire-wise habitat corridor in North County, San Diego for the coastal cactus wren and imperiled species. So we're going to turn this on. Oops. There we go. Okie dokie. So why are we focusing on habitat connectivity for coastal cactus wrens? Well, of course, you all know that we've had a lot of habitat loss due to fires and urban sprawl over the past 30 years in particular. And it turns out that only 175 coastal cactus wren territories remain in San Diego County. And by territory, I mean an appropriate mix of the habitats they need to forage and nest, and that are currently or have recently been occupied by cactus wrens. And that turns out to be too little genetic diversity to ensure the success of the species at any one site. And we have a number of different sites, the San Pasqual Valley. We also have Lake Jennings and down here, Sweetwater and Otay Mesa sites. At any one site, you need at least 50 to 100 wrens to have enough genetic diversity to prevent inbreeding. And for the area that I'm going to focus on, which is spanning between, this is roughly the area of the San Diego Safari Park, San Diego Zoo Safari Park, and east of there towards Ramona along the 78, going over to Highland Valley and then down to Lake Hodges, this area here. It turns out that 85% of the suitable areas for wrens to nest in are already occupied. So you have to think about what that means for their offspring. Their offspring either stay and they interbreed with close relatives, or they don't find a mate and breed at all because they can't find a new territory. And so all these factors make coastal cactus wrens a species of special concern in California, and that's our equivalent of an endangered or threatened species marking, and very similar to the California gnatcatcher. So what is ideal coastal cactus wren habitat? Well, it looks like this hillside here. This is up above the San Diego, or beside the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, a southwest facing slope that has 30% or more spiny cactus, spiny prickly pear cactus, mixed in with coastal sage scrub. And that's often called cactus scrub around here. And so this is what wrens are really looking for. And this is what coastal cactus wrens look like. They have a very strong white eyebrow, a curved beak, a speckled breast, kind of complicated bards, patchy pattern on their wings. And they're also the largest of our native wrens. They're 8.5 inches long. What's really unique about them is they make these football-shaped nests that are only open at one end. So I always think of them kind of like mummy bags, you know. And they go in their nest via the side, but they're about this big. And their eggs are from white to pink colored, and they take care of their young inside sort of a soft lining in the back of these nests. The cactus wrens will also nest in Cylindropuntia, which is another name for a cholla. This is in the Riverside County region where coastal cactus wrens live. And you can see that you can't really even see the nest. It's just really stuffed back in there. The wren chicks are very cute. They have these little tiny stubby tails, look super helpless. They haven't grown their white eyebrows yet, and they're looking forward to growing up. So there's some other species of birds that look similar to cactus wrens in our area. 3 of them are wrens, canyon rock and Buick's wrens. All of them either have quite different coloration for the cactus wren or lack that white eyebrow. Sage thrashers look pretty similar too, but they don't have the strong white eyebrow, and these are actually pretty uncommon. So there's some really distinctive characteristics of these cactus wrens. They have one of the longest names of any species I've ever tried to pronounce. Campylorhynchus brunicapillus, subspecies sandiegensis, which just means the San Diego curve-billed brownhead, which the cactus wren says, yes, that's me. They're really homebodies. And if there's one thing to remember about these cactus wrens, they stay within about 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles of the place where they were born. 90% of them do, and only 10% will try to stray further. And so this is really the strongest restriction on them, that you really need contiguous territory that they can get to. And once you start chopping it up, they're sort of stuck in an area where they're going to max out that territory pretty quickly. Another feature of them is that they build about 6 nests in their territory. And you can think of 5 of those nests as decoys, so that predators are looking in the wrong nest all the time, which is maybe something we ought to try as humans. People are looking for us, we're somewhere else. But they have a brood nest that's slightly larger and lined with soft lining, and it's full of cute little babies. They actually use the other nests as year-round shelters. And you can imagine, given where they're nesting, it's pretty hot and useful to get out of the sun. And 87% of them stay in the same territory year after year. Another problem for wrens is that they're not strong flyers. So it's really optimal when you have an area that splits a wren territory and there's a road through it, if there's an embankment on either side so they can kind of hop across above the cars, they're pretty much okay. But once the areas on either side are flat, they don't really like to fly up and over, and that's when they're at risk of collisions. So the survival rates are not great. Adult cactus wrens, about 2/3 of them make it to the next year, whereas only about 1/4 of the first-year wrens, the babies, make it to the next year. This is where Jess comes in and plays the ever-popular, crank it up. So coastal cactus wrens sound like somebody trying to start a car with a dying battery. And it can be like higher pitched, it can be faster, slower, but that's how you can recognize them. And I think we're good. But they also have a number of other calls that are more like kek, kek, kek. And they have friendly ones for their mate and for their chicks. And then they have nasty ones for other cactus wrens in their territory, or birds coming in to eat them. So they're quite vocal when they're defending their territory, which is between about February and July. They like crunchy food. Instead of potato chips, they like flies, beetles, black scale insects, bees, wasps, caterpillars, and that's the vast majority of their diet, which they forage for on the ground, either in bare earth and grass. And then they like to go into elderberry trees late in the season to capture insects. Fruit and seeds are less than 20% of their diet, but fortunately the prickly pear cactus they love to nest in is full of fruits, and it's very juicy. And I've noticed that in my yard, the mockingbirds come and eat that fruit, and they drag it into the middle of their driveway, so it leaves like big pink spots everywhere, but it's pretty funny. They don't really like to eat amphibians or reptiles, but sometimes they do. So they have, there's a lot of course, different plants in coastal sage scrub, but the USGS group led by Chris Preston and Barbara Kuhn are really, they're world experts. They know everything about cactus wrens, and they're invaluable to us who are trying to do good things for the wrens. But they published papers showing that California sagebrush, which is really an Artemisia, but still smells very strongly of sage, having a lot of that in the area where the wrens are has a positive effect on the success of the fledglings. So does California buckwheat, or Eriogonum fasciculatum. Unfortunately, non-native grasses and mustards are very common everywhere in the county, and they have a negative effect on successive fledglings, probably because it makes it harder to find insects. Blue elderberry trees, Sambucus nigra, subspecies Cerulean, the berries and leaves look like this beautiful plant you can find along the shores of Lake Hodges, or in any area that's just a tiny bit wetter than the normal cactus scrub. And they like to perch in these trees and also pick insects off them late in the season. So this is the buckwheat, this is the Artemisia, and looking close up at the Artemisia leaves, which are very delicate. Now, there are lots of different threats to coastal cactus wrens. Of course, predators. One thing that surprised me is western rat snakes are actually excellent at climbing trees and shrubs. And so one reason you don't want to have overhanging vegetation over the cactus is the snakes can simply drop down on the nest and crawl in and swallow, which this one unfortunately is, baby birds, or eat their eggs. Scrub jays, crows, and ravens. I'm a great corvid lover. I used to have a crow that used to perch on my head and let me walk around on my head. Wallace the crow, too used to people, unfortunately, but unfortunately they like to eat baby birds and eggs. Cooper's hawks and harriers can swoop down and snatch them. And that's why you really don't want to place cactus wren habitat too close to creeks, because it's perching area for raptors. Unhealthy cactus is not a place that they'll use for nesting. In wildfires, cactus have kind of two sides to them in fire. They're great at repelling fires because you can think of them as big water balloons, right? The fire hits the water balloon and just fizzles out there. But on the other hand, most cacti have really shallow roots, so the fires tend to burn the roots, and then the cactus don't succeed afterwards. Of course, habitat fragmentation and loss to development are a giant problem for cactus wrens because of their limited exploration. And domestic and feral cats are great birders. So there are a lot of things you have to think about. Like, for instance, you wouldn't want to site cactus wren habitat in your backyard unless you have 20 acres of land and you're far away from feral cats and that sort of thing. So the impact of wildfires on cactus wrens and every other bit of wildlife has been really strong in North County. This is Escondido, Rancho Bernardo, Poway area. And the color scheme is the most recent fires are the darkest colored areas, and the oldest fires are the lightest colors. But you can see that, and also I should say that these are the cactus wren observations, where light blue are the oldest observations from the 80s and 90s, and dark blue are the most recent ones from the past 15 years roughly. You can see that these fires have really just gone straight through cactus wren prime territory, from the safari park down through Highland Valley here, over across to Lake Hodges. And so the cactus wren, the remaining habitat for them that did not burn beyond recovery is back here in the safari park area. And the problem for us west of the I-15 is a lot of the cactus is gone, and we're planting it back strategically for them. Many years, probably 20 years of work or so, have gone into restoring cactus on the north shore of Lake Hodges and more recently on the south shore. So I think of these cacti as spiny fortresses for wrens because they provide all the protection that the wrens and their babies need from predators when they're in the cactus nests. And there are really two main kinds of prickly pear cactus that the wrens use in our area. There's Opuntia littoralis, which is a coast prickly pear, and Opuntia auricola, which is a chaparral prickly pear. They're all distributed along the coastal plains up to the Peninsula Range in Southern California up to the Santa Barbara area. And at first I really had a lot of trouble identifying prickly pear cactuses. And if you look on iNaturalist, you'll find that a lot of people do. So you'd find some really funny IDs there. But the coast prickly pear, the pads are kind of oval and elongated, whereas the auricola are rounder. And these look, the thing you would really notice is kind of the brown fuzzy appearance of these, like a teddy bear. And that fuzz is actually these glochids that are little tiny spicules or spines at the base of the big spines. These are actually the nasty things to get in your skin or in your clothing. 3 weeks after you've gone planting, you'll find them like in the band of your underwear or something like that. So it's I'm very respectful of glochids and try not to touch them ever. But that really distinguishes the Opuntia auricola. But both of them are really fine for cactus wrens to nest. This is just a lower plant, maybe 2 to 3 feet tall, that spreads to about 5 or 6 feet, whereas this is a taller, like 2-meter plant. And as long as they have enough cactus between them and the predators, they're okay. One thing that really surprised me is that this coast prickly pear has a much greater range in elevations, precipitation, and temperatures it can tolerate. So it's a really great plant for us to work with because it's not so picky about the sites as auricola is. One plant that you see everywhere, even in areas that you think are totally wild, is this Opuntia ficus indica, or the Indian fig. This is actually from, I think it's from Australia originally. And it's actually around the world at this point because it's grown as livestock food. But it has these giant pads that are anywhere from about 18 inches to 2 feet long. It grows these fruits or tunas in great abundance around the edge. But the real problem is it has, many pads have either no spines or really short, ineffectual spines. So the cactus wrens don't want to nest in that. So it's not a useful plant. Recently, there's been a lot of concern about fungus as a pathogen of the Opuntia littoralis that the wrens use in the North County area. And this is what happened at a cactus nursery that was planted by the SDMMP, which is the San Diego Management and Monitoring Program for restoring vulnerable species. They planted a big cactus nursery to use as a source for planting elsewhere, like in the Mule Hill area of Highland Valley. And all of a sudden, the cactus were just covered with this fungus, Alternaria alternata. I was a little surprised because when you read about that fungus, it's actually in about 90 species of plants around the world and is normally not a major pathogen. But they undertook a study with UC Davis to try to figure out what was going on. And the UC Davis guys inoculated pads with this fungus, so they had a controlled amount. And then they looked at a range of temperatures and humidities, and they found that this cactus really only spreads when the plants are in high humidity rather than low humidity areas. And this turned out to be in the floodplain of Santa Maria Creek here, upland a little bit. And when they're watered significantly rather than little or never. And really the problem seemed to be that the pads were getting watered when the watering was happening, so the pads were staying wet, and that grew the fungus. So once they changed that practice 2 years later, the cactus are all fungus free. So it's just a really good thing to know. One thing I found kind of fascinating is people often think that this white fluffy stuff on the prickly pears is some kind of fungus too, but it turns out to be a little tiny scale insect called cochineal, which is about 2 to 3 millimeters long and is this bright purplish pink colored. And scale insects can be really decimating on some kinds of cactus, but these have co-evolved with each other, and it doesn't seem to do much harm to the prickly pear. And it turns out it exudes that fluffy white stuff is kind of a sunscreen, so it doesn't get sunburned, and also so that birds and other animals that might want to eat it can't even see where it is. And so that's just kind of a decorative coating. It's also found when Opuntia is too shaded or moist. You often find it on one side of the pad, but not other. And I just haven't found it to be a problem in practice. If you want to get rid of it, it's really easy to just wipe it off. As a biochemist, I found it kind of fascinating that these creatures are that color because they make carminic acid, this pigment, as 20% of their body weight. And you can imagine if 20% of us was food coloring or something, that's kind of a strange biochemistry, but it's actually a repellent, or prevents other animals from eating them because it doesn't taste good. And really, this is much in demand by people who dye fabrics and other things around the world for the past several hundred years. For instance, Zapotec weavers use this cochineal insect. They just grind them up, about 60,000 of them or something you need to make a vat of dye. And if you rub that on your hand and just drip a little lemon juice, depending on what the pH is in that particular part of your hand, you can get this whole range of colors. And so it's really a very powerful dye, and it's totally natural. And oh, this is used as a food coloring that's totally safe for people too. So another plant that cactus wrens like to nest in, I mentioned they like cholla. The one around here, this is actually in Balboa Park across the street when it was in bloom. It's the coastal cholla, or Cylindropuntia prolifera, and it is very prolific in making these segments of cholla, which you walk by and they fly through the air and they attach themselves to you. They're the flying plants. My sister had one on the toe of her shoe that you can't get rid of them. But the reason we don't really work with these, I think Mike Kelly planted some cholla for Cactus Wrens of Lake Hodges, is they're quite difficult to work with. They're hard to handle. So, but they're perfectly fine. For cactus wrens, they're very pretty. So my first real project in the field, I didn't want to just kind of study them. I wanted to work in habitat, was to create a cactus nursery at Escondido Creek Conservancy, Mountain Meadow Preserve, which most of this land is actually owned by San Diego County, and the Creek Conservancy owns some of the land, has their headquarters there, but then takes care of the rest of it. And it's on this ridgetop here, it was formerly all avocado orchards that have been cut down, I think either from fire or from lack of water. And so it's area that's being replanted in coastal sage scrub. And I worked at the native plant nursery there for a couple of years before this project, growing coast live oaks and a whole range of other species. This is Brad Kristen, who's their new conservation director, standing in the patch of cactus that I planted. So how I got started was in the spring of 2023. I designated an area that had the right southwestern exposure and was dry enough, and started pulling PVC pipe that was everywhere out of the ground from all these orchards. And at that point, there was a lot of invasive grass and also star thistles and invasive mustard. So Juan Troncoso mowed all of that back, and then I started spot treating to set back the star thistle and the mustard. So once it grows up in the midst of the cactus, it's obviously a little harder to weed it out then. And so my very first cactus baby was planted that September, single pad, and by December I planted 83 in a big horseshoe. And to me, it was just miraculous. 10 months later, this is what one of these little babies looks like. It had grown 5 or 6 new pads with no watering, no care. You just watch it and you pray that it's going to succeed, and it does all the rest itself. So it's been a very successful planting. And this is going to be used as a source of propagating cactus to plant in the Keithley Preserve, which is right around the corner from the part of Lake Hodges that's a great cactus wren habitat. So we hope they're going to make it over there too. How we propagate Opuntia, it's a very low-tech sort of thing. It's kind of, again, miraculous, is if you go along Highway 76 or Highway 78, there's there are often steep road shoulders where Caltrans comes in and mows them every year or two. And this actually got mowed about a year before. So this cactus is growing past the property line onto the shoulder. And so you're effectively rescuing that cactus from perdition. And you just go in with a pair of loppers with good leather gloves that are leather all the way around your fingers, and you cut the joint between the terminal pad and the next pad down, and layer them in a plastic bin with some cardboard between so they don't stab each other too much, like children do in the back of a car or whatever. And so, and you can use this to carry them out in the field, but what we do is actually let the pads harden up for a couple of weeks, because what cactus are really susceptible to is fungus. So if you plant them right with a cut end in the ground, they're just going to succumb to fungus right away. So you let that harden up, and then you plant the bottom third of the pad in the ground like this, standing up on a south-facing slope, and you're in pretty good shape. And we can just use that little roll cart that the kind people use at the beach to take them down the trail. And when you're out there, even in these really degraded sites, you can find some great plants like the stinging lupin, all covered with dewdrops, and it just makes you feel really good about the world. So once we got the cactus nursery planted there, I started making educational signage, which I think we should do for all of our projects that we're doing out in the field, because people look and they're interested and they don't really know what's going on, and they don't know how to do it themselves. So this sign probably has too many words on it, but it has some information about cactus wrens and what they need. And then the other sign is about where they are and what their habitat looks like, with a QR code that they can get some more information. And they're made out of a kind of aluminum thing called dye bond that lasts forever. And it just costs like $50 per sign to make these. So it was really easy to do. So I'm going to switch to the cactus wren perspective. This is what a cactus wren really wants to see in its world. This is at the top of the trail at San Pasqual Battlefield State Park. And I'm a cactus wren perched on the Opuntia looking at my beautiful world. And I see coastal sage scrub and cactus, and I see a riparian corridor way below. That's a good place for me to jump down and get some insects. And then I see Highland Valley going this way, which connects with more cactus wrens who are my aunts and uncles and such. So it's this is what we hope to replicate for them. And looking at that same area from up above, we were just standing up here where the cactus wren was, and this is actually the most occupied cactus wren site anywhere in the county, 54 pairs, or 54 territories, so 54 pairs in that area just to the east of the safari park is here, and then 8 pairs there, 8 more in Whitman Ranch. So you can see it accounts for about half of the total number of cactus wrens in the whole county. And 37 were active nests when they were last counted in 2023. You can also see some problems, fragmentation of their habitat between these places. This is that Rancho Guajito winery where they've planted grapevines and avocado trees right in the middle, unfortunately. And I have tried to communicate with them about that to keep what they have left. And then you go through Highland Valley where Mule Hill was the site of the Great Battle in the for California becoming part of the US actually, and it's also a Wren center. And then you go over, I-15 is interesting. This is the San Dieguito River running this way to form Lake Hodges. And there's actually such a tall, long bridge of I-15 over that it's like a wildlife overpass for cactus wrens and many other animals. So this is a great success where they can move back and forth a bit. I was so excited about 18 months ago when I started looking at the data on iNaturalist and saw that after many years, about 30 years, cactus wrens were again being seen south of Lake Hodges. For many years, they were just in this one area here and in this area, nothing south where they used to be. Along Lusardi Creek runs this way. So we see 2 sightings down here that are new. And for those of you who haven't used iNaturalist, it's just such a great thing to do. I'm really hooked on it like John Rebman was last month, that you can identify any sort of animal or plant and you can learn a lot, and then you get feedback from experts, and then it's science that actually aids professional like conservation agencies like USGS in their work. And in fact, the USGS doesn't have funding to work west of I-15, so we can really fill a needed gap in this project. Now, if you look on eBird, which is the equivalent for the birding world, this is from Cornell University, we saw yet different cactus wren observations south of Lake Hodges. This site has actually been occupied continuously for the past 18 months. There are always wrens there, so that is a territory. This is right behind a neighborhood. This is behind Oak Valley Middle School, and this is next to the parking lot of Black Mountain Ranch Community Park. And so we're seeing that wrens are now moving north-south, and this is the way I would depict what all the data that we're seeing. These blue points here are where we know there is appropriate Opuntia littoralis for cactus wrens to nest in. So we see there, even around this industrial park, and then going along Lusardi Creek westward to where it meets with the San Dieguito River there. The gold observations are historical cactus wren observations from about 30 years ago, and the red are the recent ones. So we see that they seem to be dropping down south with the potential to move west and reclaim the territory they used to occupy. And the reason this seems to have been facilitated is by the lowering of the level of Lake Hodges due to the issues with the dam there. Then instead of having this big, scary lake to fly over, which they don't want to do, now this is actually all riparian up to about this point. This whole stretch in here is just filled with willows and shrubs so rapidly you wouldn't believe it. And the wrens find that a great place to forage. And now Chris Preston thinks it's probably the first-year wrens that are leaving home are now going down south looking for mates and looking for nesting spots. So we think that there's a great opportunity to do something useful along this pink zone here, keeping in mind that I-15 has 14 barriers of traffic, so it's kind of like a prison wall, but then they can get through up there. So this is a much reduced version of that data just to keep it from being overwhelming, but I just wanted to state that my hypothesis is that wrens are actually not reaching the good nesting habitat that does exist down in the Black Mountain area in western Lusardi Creek. because it's not contiguous enough with where they're occupying up in Lake Hodges. So you can see there's a big gap between blue points here, where each of these grid lines is actually, they're 1 kilometer apart. So it's like 1, 2, 3.5 kilometers away. Most wrens are never going to make it that far. And the same thing here and there. And so our focus is on to start connecting these blue patches of opuntia with other opuntia where the cactus wrens can nest in between. And that really should have a big impact, because right now it's known that in the Lake Hodges survey that 96% of all the suitable nesting territory for wrens is already occupied. They've maxed it out. The young are desperate to find new homes south of there. And our strategy is basically following these green arrows. I've been working in this area with Beth Mather and Del Brooks and Cindy Barascano and other people, Mike Kelly, who've been working for many years here. I just kind of dropped in the scene and said, let's keep working on this cactus wren need. And so this is in Black Mountain Ranch Park there. The idea of building stepping stones every 1 to 2 kilometers along this pathway connecting back up to where there's good cactus on the south shore of Lake Hodges. And, you know, it's kind of overwhelming for me, like everyone. I can't plant 6,000 cactus, but I can plant a couple hundred a year. And if I keep doing that year after year, and if other people join us to do that, it's really going to make a difference for the species. So this is just to show you all the fabulous work that's already going on in that site. The Friends of Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve and the City of San Diego Parks and Recreation have fabulous rangers who totally believe in natural area restoration. This coastal sage scrub here has all been reclaimed from invasive grasses and pervasive artichoke thistle, which escaped from a farm down in Lusardi Creek many years ago and just blanketed these hillsides. They've recreated all this coastal sage scrub here, and then the rangers have planted this area. And so really amazing things are happening that are connecting all the good areas. And we can just keep on working upward and outward. And we can see here from this site where I'm actually planting cactus with Del Brooks and Beth Mather that this area that's brownish has been treated for invasive species, that's within view line of Christopher Hill County Park, which has a lot of native cactus on it already there, and then up to where the Bernardo Summit area is there. So you can just see the corridor the way that the cactus wrens can see it. This is how good that coastal sage scrub that's been restored looks. It's growing plants you don't see that often, like California 4 o'clocks. It's just, every time I go out there, I just say, I got to keep doing this because it works. You know, it's great. And this is a Cindy Barascano and colleague success story of going back to 2009 to 2017. This is along further west along Lusardi Creek, the coastal sage scrub, cactus scrub that they planted there that looks just like what you would see in the safari park area. So you just need to wait a while and it really does grow the way it should. And the cactus wrens haven't made it that far west yet. So this is a photo of Beth Mather and Del Brooks, who worked with me in January 2025, just a year ago, although it seems like longer than that, to plant cactus in that area along Awi Trail that already had a good population of cactus that Del and others had planted previously. And so we're just expanding the cactus patch in that area. And Beth has plans. She's the president of Friends of Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve to plant coastal sage scrub in this area also. And you can see how well that cactus that Del planted is doing terrifically. And so when we look at the next slide, that first slide, I should say, is just off the left edge of the slide here. We know we want to go about 1 to 2 kilometers to the east, and it turns out that that's a very convenient location because this is part of the San Diego, the City of San Diego's Black Mountain open space area. There's a road up to Miners Ridge there and a trail called the Miners Ridge Trail there. And when we look at the Cactus Wren Habitat Suitability Index created by the USGS folks in SDMMP, they show this is the highest suitability area for cactus wrens to move into the future if there were cactus there. It has everything else they need. And we can kind of see these patches of contiguous area. So it seems quite possible to move eastward and then northward and really create this corridor. The habitat suitability features, it's a computational machine learning model that trained on data having to do with temperatures of the sites, elevation, slope, the percentage of non-native versus native cover, the rainfall, the lack of north or eastern exposure, how rugged the site was, and whether it's a good site for prickly pear and sagebrush. And so it's really, it's such a good model that it actually can predict 95% of cactus wren sites with no false positives. So that's terrific success. And another piece of data I found very useful is a San Diego Association of Governments. All of this data is actually out there. Any of us can use it for any of our projects, but their vegetation layer shows you where all the coastal sage scrub already is, what's a bog and a marsh, so that's probably not a good place to plant grasslands. And so you can see these stretches of coastal sage scrub in the sage-colored patches. You can just kind of see where is a good area to be working in. So this is the planting that started last fall and into last month. It's a great time of year to plant because then the baby cactus have a chance to get the winter rain and not face too much heat before they grow roots. And so this is along Miners Ridge Trail, runs right here. This area was cleared by the rangers, and Beth Mather prepared the site. And then between October and last month, I planted 147 cacti then, and just stopped because it's starting to get a little bit hot outside. And we'll just see how they do here. This is a new site for us, but we're very hopeful it's going to look like that other site did. And so now that we've got two sites going, we really have to think about the big strategy. And of course, you want to know where there's existing Opuntia in large quantity. And it turns out there's no really systematic prickly pear map of North County west of the 15. We do have an iNaturalist, some data of individuals saying, I saw a cactus here, I saw one there, but we don't know what species it is usually because they didn't identify them that carefully. They just said Opuntia, or how much of it there is. But this is kind of a starting kind of clue of where we should be looking for existing cactus, so we don't put our new patches of cactus right next to where there's already enough of it. And I started looking at the Sandag satellite imagery. They have imagery that has 9-inch resolution that all of us can use. And if you look at the sage scrub from above, you can kind of just see the cactus because it's lighter in color, right? And if you get a little higher resolution than this, it looks very like little line segments crossing each other. You can kind of see the structure of the cactus, whereas the coastal sage scrub is more uniform and blobby. But there are always some sites where I can't really tell for sure if that's cactus. If you're on the site, this is what it looks like from a camera in the wetter part of year. But you can't really make a map seeing things from the side. So what I did is I got out with my GPS device and I actually marked every cactus in that area as kind of a gold standard for that one site where there is quite a lot of cactus. And there is enough for a pair of wrens to nest in this south-facing slope of Black Mountain. Another thing I should mention about the aerials is that artichoke thistle, unfortunately, in the wet season, looks just like cactus from the aerials. So that's another challenge for us. But we have a solution. Austin Zhang, who's a senior at Del Norte High School, he's a robotics expert, he's a computer programmer, he's done drone imagery, vegetation mapping with Beth and the city of San Diego guys before. And so I went out there with him one day and he flew his drone at 23 to 3 feet above the ground. You can see the cactus very clearly there. And so from his imaging, we can map the cactus. You don't want to fly higher because there are power lines everywhere and the drones don't really want to fly into a power line. It's kind of an expensive mistake to make. But the idea is to use his imagery in combination with my tentative identification from aerials and see if we can combine those two to create something that's as good as the mapping by foot, because I cannot cover 50 square miles of impenetrable vegetation. I'm not quite that tough, but I do want to get a good map. So hopefully that will solve that problem. And we also really need more data on where cactus wrens are, because if you think of that eBird and the iBird data, maybe half a dozen observations, we know that they're there, but that had to be somebody who could identify a cactus wren. And there aren't people on those trails most of the time, and they're not looking for cactus wrens. So we really want to get more birders and people who want to identify wrens out there on the trails actually searching for them and helping us get data about where they're going and where they're not going. And so what I did in August was I went out to all these areas where cactus wrens had been seen, because I wanted to know the kind of habitat, and it's largely coastal sage scrub, not cactus, that they're seen next to. And also I defined a set of trails that are a maximum of 3 miles each. Each of those trails goes near cactus wren sighting places, but also fills in the regions in between them. So the Route 1 fills in this area. Route 2 ends up at a waterfall, which you wouldn't really expect to find there, but that was great. This is a historical sighting and another sighting. So the series of 6 routes actually spans a whole region between Lake Hodges and down where we're planting cactus now. And I would really encourage anybody who's interested in helping. This is one great way to help, is if you want to email me, I can provide you this route information, where to park, how to follow the trail. And you can just go out whenever you want and then post your sightings on iNaturalist or eBird, and it will really help the project. Another thing I learned about from Zach Principe of the Nature Conservancy, who's a big fan and helper of cactus wrens, is there's a device called the audio moth, which is about half the size of a small cell phone. It's about 2 inches square. And it's a tiny circuit board that can listen to audio frequencies in this range, from cactus wren up to the sound of a bat, actually, or a moth. And it can listen to those, and it can record them onto a micro SD card. And you can tell it when to listen. And then depending on how many hours a day you want it to listen, it can go for up to about a month, just on its own on 3 AA batteries. You put it in a plastic bag so it doesn't get hurt if it gets rained on. And it's the birder out there all the time for you. And so now I'm working on configuring this to listen for cactus wrens. And what you do when you're done collecting that data is you plug it into software on your laptop called BirdNet Analyzer, which is basically your laptop version of the Merlin software that's a cell phone app for identifying bird calls. And it makes a list of the species and times and can play back the audio for you. And so you have all that data, and it's like $99. You know, it's not a big investment. So I'm really excited to put one of these out in one of those sites where I'm like Christopher Hill, where there are likely wrens. And just to another way that all of you gardeners can contribute is by planting coastal prickly pear and coastal cholla in your own yard. And I did this in a corner of my yard where people tended to just, the mailman and the neighbors tended to just trample through this area, and now they have to jump over it. But it turned out the mockingbirds love the fruits from these, and I really like it because it's a little vestige of the Old West in my front yard. The birds and bees love having this to sip nectar from, and they pollinate. And it turns out that the prickly pears have 2 genera of bees that are totally specific to prickly pears, and also the sweat bees, which like to sit on your hand when you're sweaty and have a little sip of all that salt. So that planting these cactus is important for the insect life as well as for the birds. And that turns out to be a really big message that's coming through lately. I don't know, most of you have probably heard that about 10 years ago, it was found that we've lost about 30% of North American bird population altogether since 1970. So in a short period of time, like this is 2.9 billion birds per year are missing from the wild. And it turns out that that decline isn't all kinds of birds. It's the birds that are specifically dependent on insects for their food. And so we need to think when we're planting our gardens, not to go to Home Depot and buy non-native plants that don't provide hosting needs for our insect species, but plant natives, and not just 1 or 2, but try to plant the community of natives that are in coastal sage scrub or in chaparral or whatever kind of area you live in, so that they support all those native insects that both the plants need to be pollinated by, but also that the birds need to eat, and that we can actually work to turn that around. And I think too, it's just to me a miracle that plants absorb the CO2 from the atmosphere, and that's their main nutrient. They turn that into all the plant matter you see. And while they're doing that, they're taking out that greenhouse gas that's our biggest problem, and they're turning it into something productive and beautiful and restorative. And so I think instead of minimalizing your landscape, I'm planting more and just making sure it's not dry, making sure there isn't dead matter there, and that keeps your yard fire safe. And also just a big message of everything we buy that's manufactured sort of has a cost to nature. When you buy it, something made it. When you're done with it, you throw it away, and it's impacting nature. So trying to use less energy and less fuel and less stuff will reduce our impact on nature and climate, will reduce the need for more roads and more buildings. And so just changing our daily habits in small ways can actually impact wildlife a lot. And we'd love for you to volunteer. We have lots of ways you can volunteer in planting or caring for plants or monitoring or mapping or helping with audio moths and things like that. So the Friends of Los Penasquitos Canyon Park email address for volunteers is there, and that will go to Beth Mather, the president, who's always out in the field herself, along with Cindy, working in the field. This is my email address, and I'd welcome your involvement in any part of the project or any questions you have later on. And that's pretty much it from me, except that I want to acknowledge all the people who have in various ways either getting me involved in the project or advising us or providing scientific data, or all the field work that's been done by these people have been a giant web of us working on behalf of nature, which is very cheering to me, because every day I read the news and find out that they've axed this environmental law and they're pumping oil there and they're burning this. You know, you need something that makes you happy, that makes you feel like you're making a difference. And this project does that for me. There are also some great resources, the SDMMP, all the data that I've shown you, all the maps, you can actually get to them on this website. The Zoo Wildlife Alliance has a lot of information because they've worked hard on behalf of the Wrens. And then there's all these citizen science tools that are very useful. And so thank you so much. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. For people who have questions, especially in the back, just raise your hand and I'll run back with the mic, and so that we can all hear your questions. So we'll take questions now.
Hello, thank you. That was a really lovely talk. I was curious about, you mentioned that choyas weren't as easy, or you decided to focus on opuntias and not the choyas for the habitats that you were working in. I was just curious about, you sort of said it was difficult, but I wondered.
Well, I'll just tell you I had a brief experience living in New Mexico when there were lots of choyas around my property, and I asked the previous landowner if there's any advice he had for me about taking care of the native plants on the property. And he said, "Here are my choya sandals." Turns out what he did is he took his hiking boots and he had like 1-inch thick flip-flop sandals that he put over them, because those little clusters of spines fall off the choyas and you step on them and they go like right through your foot. It's like impaling yourself. And also when if you just, my sister and I go out to the desert at least once or twice a year, and we're walking through these areas and we're walking very carefully. We're sure we're not touching them. And then one will get in your pant leg or and you can't, there's nowhere you can touch them to pull them off. You need to get tongs or like convince a relative that they'd rather suffer than see you suffer. But they're just very hard to handle that way, but they do grow. I mean, I was surprised that the one that you saw in my front yard was planted from a segment that fell off another plant. And in like 2 years, it was that big. And it's just, so they do grow fast, but they have to be about 5 or 6 feet tall before the Cactus wrens will use them, whereas the Opuntia littoralis needs to be about 5 or 6 feet wide. So so go for it with choyas. Maybe you'll become the propagation expert and we'll all seek your advice.
And then, yeah, thank you for your hard work, because I currently am working at Lake Jennings, so I get to listen to one all day, every day, sitting on a telephone.
Oh, fabulous.
So,
Well, send me a recording.
yeah, we'll do. And then I volunteer sometimes for the Discovery Institute, and they
Okay.
have a site next to Lake Jennings. So,
I think
so if
I've
anybody
heard a
wants-
talk on that restoration, so that's great. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
There was a classic study done on the native prickly pears by a professor at Cal State Fullerton relative to the fire effect,
Okay.
that they were low. And if they hybridized with the Ficus indica or Lingulata or some other introduced prickly pear that was taller, they were more adapted to the fire. And a lot of the theory is that a lot of this littoralis we have are hybrids. Have you looked into the genetics? And when you move these materials, do you get a local source and keep it local, or that's the question, because there's being things like the desert brittle bush has been brought in for
Oh, I
landscaping,
know that.
and
Yeah.
it's crossing with Encilia californica. The interior variety of deerweed with the short wings is now mixed up. So we're messing up our okay, there you go. Okay, you answered it.
Yeah. So with the cactus, I mean, identifying them, I think is difficult in part because there are hybrids, and there are these two here. I didn't want to go into gruesome detail, but these are other ones that you can find locally. Vasii, there we go, and semi-spinosa. And I know that one of the cacti I brought home is actually, it's much lower growing. The spines are whiter and generally, but I've seen things that really look like Opuntia littoralis with white spines. And I've seen the semi-spinosa, you can see it semi-spined, and the pads are kind of rhomboid in shape. Sometimes there are no spines, sometimes they're just, but I have one of these that looks like it crossed with Auricola because it's got the beard of brown around the edge. So I know that's true. And so it's really, as far as I can tell, that from what I've seen in the literature, the coastal cactus wrens use what's most common and is spiny enough and dense enough that they're protected. And so Opuntia littoralis is the main player for them, and it's all that USGS focuses on. But I've read that they actually will use these other species. This is too low growing if it's Vasii. And this one actually can grow taller but may not have enough spines. So just be careful when you collect and you're growing that you're growing a species that will grow robust and spiny enough that will provide them a home, but don't use non-native cacti. And
anybody moving Opuntia prolifera? Anybody trying that?
that is grown on the north shore of, it's the north shore but facing south of Lake Hodges. There is a choya, the Cylindropuntia prolifera, but it mainly that dominates in like Aguanga in the, I think it's the Wilson Valley of Riverside, which is part of the coastal cactus wren range, oddly enough. That's only choya, and you see these beautiful nests there. So what I try to do is look on the least disturbed native landscape, which I would say is the San Pasqual Valley slopes there, and use that as a guideline for what you want to do. And that's all littoralis and coastal sage scrub with a lot of Artemisia and buckwheat. And
some of these cactus, we'll call them cactus patches, like she mentioned, Lake Jennings, as you're going up toward the dam, they just don't look real. They look artificial. Do you think there's been some Native American involvement with moving this material around?
oh, the cactus are moved everywhere, because if you go into that Battlefield Park, when I was there, I saw the weirdest cactus, and I went home and I identified them, and there's 5 or 6 kinds of cactus there because people have been living in these areas for a long time. And cactus, if it likes where it is, will grow. So I think you have to think about what you're selecting to propagate, and you want it to be local, because I should also say that the some of the pads that we picked from alongside Highway 76, and this is with Zach Principe in the Pala Road area. He thought that was a good place to collect, but those pads did not do well in Escondido Creek Conservancy. So it is quite local, and you just learn by doing, but mainly big enough, robust enough, a local genotype, and not hybridizing. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to see, I've worked with a lot of cactus wren restoration, and especially in South County. So,
Cool.
and those basically were all in Puntia prolifera, you know, in the, and they're hard to work with. They're difficult, but, you know, just always use like steel tools and pick them up with tongs, or use pitchforks to pick up big segments of them, or shovels,
Yeah.
and carry them in steel trash cans, and
And
Just
watch
try-
where you step.
watch
too.
where you step. Yeah,
Yeah.
you still get spines all over you, but they're,
No,
you know.
and if that's what we saw like predominating in San Pasqual Valley, for sure, I would do the same thing. I would
Yeah.
just tough it out. But the cactus wrens will use those. It's just mainly we're in
Yeah,
our
I
area,
think
it's
there's
more
a
prickly
difference.
pear.
Yeah, once you go further north, then they're in the prickly pears. But South County, is along the coast and everything, they're in the prolifera. We actually have on our property in Encanto, where there's native birds around. They've moved onto our property, and they're nesting in a 25-foot tall euphorbia, which
Yeah, and
surrounded by, you know, a Puntia prolifera. We've got big plantation of them. We put all over,
oh,
and they built multiple nests around in those, but they're nesting up there every year, and, you know, they're producing.
well, I mean, they can figure it. They
Yeah.
survive, but mesquite, I've heard, and Palo Verde, it's not. I asked Chris Preston about that recently, and she said it's really not seen here. It's a deviant bird. You know? I like deviant birds. So I mean, anything that helps you survive, yeah, it's worth it. So, any other questions?
Oh, okay. Bob, here.
Leslie,
Yep.
and these areas that you're referring to, homeowner associations own significant chunks of land. Have you approached any of them for planting?
So say again, I didn't catch your adjective in that what area?
And these areas, say at Lusardi Creek,
Yes,
homeowner associations own significant areas
yes.
near actually the loop where you're planning to get the cactus wren. Have you approached any of them to plant cactus?
I actually would love to get help with that. It turns out that area down by Oak Valley Middle School and then across where cactus wrens were seen by a pond along Lusardi Creek, that's all 4S Ranch Master Association land. And I had a very difficult experience trying to reach anyone there by phone, because when you call, you get somebody in India who wants to know your contract number with the association before they'll let you speak to anyone. They won't even take a message. And so I think it's a very sort of impervious organization unless you're doing something they want. But recently there was a wildfire along Wine Creek in a very expensive gated neighborhood that they also take care of. And that's right next to where the Wren sighting is. So if I can find the right person to talk to in the master association that runs the homeowners associations too, we could help them with fire-wise planting in areas where they just have invasive grass right now. And I think that would be a great thing to do. I'm busy during the winter trying to do field stuff, and that's a good thing for me to tackle now. But if you know anyone in 4S Ranch, if you just know somebody who likes nature, if I know when the homeowners meetings are, I can just go there and start talking to people, you know. I think that's the best
Goat
way.
herders have a lock on quite a bit of the property near Lusardi Creek.
Yeah,
And I don't know what the long-term, excuse me. I don't know what the long-term plans are.
and I
They're
think
just using goats to eat everything, all
Yeah.
the non-native grasses,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure what they plan on doing with that property
Yeah.
after they get rid of the non-native grasses.
Yeah, well, just when you're talking to the people you know, just keep on saying. "Cactus, cactus." Yeah, Christine. Oh, sorry.
Hi, for anyone wanting to work with Choya. When I was working in the Mojave, we always carried little combs with us in case they got in. You can put
Great
it under
idea, great
and
idea
pick them
to
up.
pluck them off,
Yeah,
trail
makes it
pluckers.
A little easier, but I had a question about your prep before putting it in. What were you using to treat weeds, and did you have to go back for a few years after?
Beth Mather has been doing the herbicide treatment. I think she normally uses Roundup at Escondido Creek Conservancy. It was the aquatic formulation of Roundup, which doesn't have any petroleum and is a little,
Sure.
that's light on. And I actually did the spot treatments there, and I don't spray broadcast like this. I just zot, whatever.
How much follow-up treatments do you have to do at these sites? Is it quite extensive, or is it?
It has been, in my experience here, it's a total different thing in Michigan where I used to be working where it's wet, but here it seems if you get them before, when you have basal rosettes for the invasives, if you get them at that stage, you just don't, I mean, the star thistle, it was like a snap to get rid of it. I was just like totally amazed on that. I mustn't have put down a lot of seeds yet, in that area. But that and the mustards really were pretty easy, and it's the grass that you just keep mowing it, and that you have to really clear the area, because especially when the cactus are young, if they get shaded out, they'll never make it, So I think the grass, we can let it grow up a little bit later if we have to, but then the idea is to restore it to sage scrub, so.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing that's interesting is several people have told me that spraying herbicide on these cactus pads actually doesn't set them back at all. They're resistant because it's a different mechanism of action. Yeah, so.
Sorry, I have a
Yes.
question. So what percentage of bare ground do you try to go for? Because the pictures that you showed, it seemed like it was mostly surrounded by the cactus or the sage shrub habitat. And then within the cactus, it's more bare ground. Like what percentage would you suggest?
So that area, both areas that we planted were mostly invasive grasses. In fact, all three areas. And so you're starting from a blank slate. And so the idea is to get the cactus in there and allow it to grow up a bit before coastal sage scrub, because some areas like on the south shore of Lake Hodges, they planted tons of cactus, but they planted coastal sage scrub very close to it. And the sage scrub is growing over it, and the cactus is all like getting fungus and dying. And of course, the wrens wouldn't use it anyway if there's overhanging. So the idea is to give the cactus a running start until they're tall enough, and then leave some space, but you want to thread them through together. And I think, in the San Pasqual Valley, I think part of it has to do with the dryness of the site, takes care of the balance between them a little bit, because the coastal sage scrub doesn't grow so fast. So, sticking with drier sites is a help, but we'll kind of thread the coastal sage scrub and let it spread out, and also let it move in from the outskirts.
Okay. Sorry. Just out of curiosity, because I actually work for Earth Discovery Institute, and that's where we do the restoration.
Cool.
Yeah, and we actually have a breeding pair, so super cool.
Oh, cool.
But I always get the question of how do they not get poked, the cactus wren?
Well, I mean, if you watch, I've got Palo Verde and other spiny plants, you watch the birds in their response time. I mean, they're flying in and out, they're just, I think their feathers are designed I think they've evolved to have feathers. You can imagine your feathers, all the little, I don't know the name, there's the rachis and the pinna for ferns. I don't know what they are for bird feathers, but I think the spines just go straight through. So you just need to keep your fuselage away from the spines. But I mean, to me, it's amazing. And you can see their response time. It's like a bat. It's so quick that they co-evolve with that. And not all birds can do it, obviously.
So I've heard about cactus wrens for a long time, but like, what is their range? Are they only here? Or would I see them, like when you're in Thousand Oaks and you drop down to Ventura, there's this fantastic hillside of cactus. I don't know what it is, but, and did they ever actually go all the way to the coast?
They do go up into that area. I'm pretty sure like Chris Preston actually works on cactus wren restoration all the way through Southern California. And I think it's up around that area, Ventura, where they peter out. And to me, it's very interesting thinking about desert cactus wrens versus coastal ones. they look just like each other, they act just like each other and all that. What's different? Why do we care about the coastal ones? It's because for all these hundreds or millions, thousands of years, they've co-evolved with the vegetation and they've learned how to exploit that for nesting in insects. So if you put me in the desert, I have no idea what to do. I'm not a desert human, but you put me here and I know what to do. And I think it's the same thing with the wrens that I think people don't get. It's not that there's a specific genetic signature that makes us think, oh, this wren is valuable or that one isn't. They're just almost, they've evolved for so long that they're behaving differently. They have different requirements. They're not the same bird. So, the inland versus the coastal is really interesting too. I mean, you go from there and you go east towards Arizona and New Mexico, and cactus wrens are common. But if you took those and you put them on the coast, they probably like starve to death. So, it's not like you can do that. One thing that Chris Preston would like to do, which seems like a great idea for increasing genetic diversity of the coastal subspecies, is to actually do egg transfers between sites. The reason that hasn't been done is it's very expensive because you have to catch the eggs at the right point. You have to keep them right temperature, swap them. You have to study it, see if it works, because you don't want to affect the success of the species by depleting the number of successes. So they just haven't been able to get funding for that yet, but I think that would be great to do. Yes?
So a question, if there are some sites that are reasonably well rehabbed or suitable, and there are other sites that are very high occupancy, are there models where people ever give nature a hand and translocate some wrens to one of the new suitable sites, or are you going to wait for the wrens to kind of DIY?
That's what I was asking Chris when she talked about egg transfers, but I think, people have different tolerances for risk, and I think her approach is to take existing big sites and expand them outward, which is good, but that's always on public land. And I'm sort of thinking that there are all these other areas that they could occupy too, but I think the birds, moving them to a place where we don't know if it suits their needs is a risk. And so I think I wouldn't move adult birds because they'd be like my cats. They'd go back to where they wanted to be, or they not survive. But that we can tell that the young are trying. They're just not finding enough cactus. So I think cactus is the problem. We don't have enough cactus. As far as we know, we don't have enough cactus. So, yeah.
Anyone else have a question? Whoop.
For like citizen science and people using iNaturalist, what's the maybe easiest thing they can do to help you or other research projects? Like I just take pictures to identify plants for myself, but is there any other steps that are not hard to do that a lot of people could do and would help you?
I think just getting the data up there is good, but when you set up your account, you either say you want your data be private or public. You obviously need to share that data to do that, and then to correct your entries when you get feedback from an expert who says it's something else, to try to keep your data as pure as you can. But just, it's a learning process. I've made so many like bad IDs.
I've just let the computer do it. So is there like, should I be going in and making it better?
One thing you can always do that's very useful is look at the range map for what you've identified it as.
Okay.
Because when it says visually similar and seen in this area, it may think that all of California is the same area. So looking, is what you've identified it the most common thing of the similar creatures in that area, or cactus or whatever, and that helps you correct yourself, but you'll still get embarrassed. And I just decided, there's so many things I don't know, it's not embarrassing anymore. You never learn unless you push yourself. And so I think getting the data out there, and for something like a cactus wren, it will be corrected quickly. Okay. So.
Mine's a simple one. I wasn't quick enough when you put up the two contact informations for you.
Oh, sure. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
So please, and you feel free to take photographs of if you want to take photographs of any of these slides, we can flip back to them. And this, Jess is Jess is my salvation. He made all this possible. He is recording this presentation and it will be on the CNPS website, so you can go back and take a look also.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. Wonderful
you all. You're a great
presentation. Thank you all. So, please help yourself to refreshments. I forgot the coffee, but it's there now in case there are any late night coffee drinkers.